maybe it's just an extra special long episode.
Welcome to a special episode of Let's Rewatch. This is not really a normal episode on our regular schedule. It's what I've been affectionately thinking of as the Star Wars Christmas special. No, we're not watching the actual Star Wars holiday special. We're doing something a little bit different with Star Wars in celebration of the upcoming release of The Force Awakens on December 18th. So before we actually set up what we're going to do, knowing that it is Star Wars, let's introduce our regulars here. Of course, I'm Nick.
I'm Brett.
I'm Sam.
I'm Ash.
Am I in this?
And that's Bryce.
And we're joined by our first returning special guest. This is the guest that we had on when we did our episode for Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Could you say it's like the return of a Jedi?
It's the return of the guest guy.
Our resident Buffy expert, but also huge fan of movies in general, and of course Star Wars. Ian Martin is with us.
Hello, honored to be back. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Of course, you can catch Ian's stuff online, primarily through YouTube, through the Passion of the Nerd YouTube channel, where he does a review show for every episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, still in progress, as well as lots of other cool stuff.
Still kind of in progress, yes.
Oh, come on. You'll never walk away from that.
I've been lagging behind a little bit lately, but yeah. It's just youtube.com/Passion of the Nerd.
Excellent. So we're very happy to have Ian with us. We have a pretty big undertaking in front of us today, and it's a different format from what we usually do. It turns out that most of us, completely accidentally and unplanned, decided to do the full marathon of the existing 6 Star Wars movies. And once we kind of figured out that most of us were doing that, we decided to do like an episode of Let's Rewatch where we talked about how we feel about Star Wars. And Ian, you just did like a hardcore load over the past week to catch up.
Yeah, I watched 6 movies in 3 days.
Wow.
How you feeling there, buddy?
A little Star Wars out.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're doing this with us.
I also watched a couple of the fan versions, the Phantom edit of the prequel trilogy, which gave me an interesting perspective, I thought, on some of the problematic parts of that series.
So before we get into like actual what our thoughts were, let's kind of set up, I'm not going to talk about what Star Wars is and when it was released and all that stuff. But let's talk a little bit about what we watched. So Ash, Bryce, and myself watched episode order, starting with episode 1, the first prequel. And then we watched, for the original series, we watched the despecialized edition.
Yes.
Which is
Han shot first.
It's sort of like a fan edit, but sort of like the original cut. Basically, somebody took the best quality reproductions of, the special edition, the original, all of that stuff, and recreated a very high quality version of what is almost exactly the original version of the movies. So no new effect shots. Han shoots first. No Jabba the Hutt in A New Hope. All that stuff.
A couple of really poorly tracked mats.
Yeah, there were some rough shots here and there, but basically we saw the non-special edition.
And I just want to add real quick that, like, when we started this podcast, the first thing that we all agreed upon was that we would never do Star Wars. And here's our reason. Because Star Wars is universally recognized as a great movie series as far as the originals go.
Right. We agreed we would never talk about movies that are universally recognized as great. Star Wars is off limits.
But upon doing this crazy rewatch that Nick and I, and Bryce did, at almost the same time, Nick and I text each other and go, we need to do an episode of this because watching them in order was such an interesting experience that we just felt like we had to talk about it.
So this is not an episode based on A New Hope. We would never do that episode. This is not based on Empire Strikes Back because everybody agrees that's pretty close to a masterpiece, if not one of the best movies. This is a conversation about the 6 existing movies as a unit.
Yeah.
Now, Ian, you watched the despecialized versions of the new of the original series as well, right?
I watched a little bit of both. By the time we got to Return of the Jedi, I actually watched just the new Blu-ray editions.
With the special edition, the new visual effects.
Yep, the blinking Ewoks and the shouty Vader throwing the Emperor over the thing.
Ghost Anakin at the end.
Ghost Anakin, yeah.
Okay. Brett and Sam, you did release order.
Yeah, we did it a little differently. We watched it with a friend who had never seen any of the Star Wars movies. So that's how we kind of got started watching them again. And we went back and rewatched all the originals and then went to the prequels.
They were so unfamiliar with the series, they didn't know like Luke and Leia were related, and
which is beautiful. Like I love that so much. I was talking to Ash the other day. I was born in 1978, 1 year after the first movie, to the day. May 25th, 1978 was when I was born. So I think it was 1980, Empire Strikes Back came out, and it's probably my first time in a movie theater. I've never lived in a world without Yoda. And the growth of Yoda as a character is just like known stuff to me, you know? And it's weird. You're talking about your friend who had never seen it. It's weird.
She kept making really funny comments about like Leia hitting on Luke and on Han Solo, and we're like,
Just wait.
play it cool. And then like they kissed, and she's like, "Oh, what a player!" And we're like, "Oh,
You're my sister." I've always known. Really?
Yeah,
because
that's an incredible line.
Really, you've made out a few times.
Yeah, another funny thing is that I had not seen the second and the third prequel.
You just never had seen
I
it.
had never seen them.
Okay.
So,
Really?
yeah.
Never? Wow.
That's kind of a shame because it's my feeling. I just want to throw this out here as a point of conversation. I think the prequels are unfairly judged based on how horrible episode 1 is.
Well, I think we're jumping ahead,
That's a
right?
questionable thought.
I have thoughts on that, but
Okay.
so
let's get into it. Why don't we talk a little bit in episode order? And I think a really good way to kick this off, if you're into it, I want to hear what Bryce has to say about episode 1.
Oh boy, hold on to your butts.
Did not like it.
Harsh.
Done.
You want to give us a little bit more? Like, you were pretty passionate.
I just want to let you know, viewers, that I know that Bryce doesn't say, or listeners, I know that Bryce doesn't say a lot on this podcast because Bryce generally usually doesn't have a lot to say about movies. And we finished watching episode 1, and he was so angry about the movie that he literally ranted about it for 3 full days. I've never seen him so angry about a film before.
It was pretty bad. I guess I don't know where to begin.
Performances?
Performances, it's surprising because I remember as a kid watching this movie in theaters, being really excited, you know, and I don't think I've seen it since I watched it in theaters because I was very unhappy and disappointed because I loved the originals and this was not the originals. But I don't think I've seen it since. And I was wondering, okay, you know, this is a perfect example. Will it hold up to my terrible memory? And it was absolutely, it was worse than I remembered it.
Misa, no think it holds up.
I mean, Jar Jar was just, I mean, this is obvious. Everyone knows that.
Yeah,
it was
Jar Jar's
very, very
rough.
painful, but it was so much worse than I remembered.
Yeah, actually experiencing it again, it's like, wow.
It's like, wow, I remember this being bad, but this is painful. And surprisingly, like the acting I felt in that movie, just in general, overall, didn't really hold up.
Yeah, one of those
felt-
cases of great actors coming off very badly.
There was a lot of like, I feel like you're just reading a line off a script and not, you know, acting like I don't feel like you believe what that character is saying. It just feels like it's being read. And then, you know, Jar Jar needing to end every scene with like this weird quib, just some
Poop
sound
jokes.
or just something.
Poop
Yeah,
jokes
just
in
like
Star Wars.
every scene had to end with just make Jar Jar do something stupid that just makes you, you know, facepalm. It was yeah, it was painful.
When I saw episode 1 for the first time, you know, in the theater on release night, you know, the country was seething with anticipation. and saw it at midnight release in a theater full of people who were so excited, and the atmosphere like being drained from that theater as people slowly realized what was happening was weird. And then like applauding when the droid control ship blows up because they just wanted to applaud at the end, but it was clear they'd already run out of steam.
Well, I don't know. I was incredibly excited to see episode 1, and I saw it 6 or 8 times in the theater, including 3 times in one day.
So you enjoyed it on original release?
It took me. I mean, that's the thing. As a hardcore fan, I wanted it to be good. I so wanted it to be good that I think I was in denial. It took. Yeah. I don't think I realized how much I didn't enjoy that movie until I saw episode 2. Because everyone at the end of episode 1 said, "Oh, okay, well, maybe the next one will be better because that's the one that's not about a tiny baby that whines all the time. It's about the actual transition story to evil." And then you saw the second one and you kind of went, "Oh no, they're just bad." At least that was my experience of it. I know
that's weird because I feel like the prequels got better.
See, I thought the second one was like a factor worse than the first one.
That's fascinating. That's weird.
Yeah, I have to disagree there.
It really picked up at the end, but of the third one, but the second one or the first one was bad because of Jar Jar and because of fucking terrible child actor. But it was
not just the child actor. Like everyone in that movie is very flat and very stiff. And I don't know if it was just, I'm assuming it was the direction that they were given.
I agree.
Because we all know Natalie Portman is an amazing actress.
She is amazing and she did terrible.
Yeah.
And Ewan and my boy Liam Neeson's.
But having just watched 2 and 3 yesterday, I already can't remember what happened in 2 because it sucked.
I remember
so much about 1, and we watched that a week and a half ago now.
Well, 2 is the bridge, but it's also the Jango Fett movie. It's the fan service for people who love Boba Fett.
And it's also the worst on-screen romance in the history of movies.
That's why it sucked.
It was agreed, but it wasn't as bad as I remembered it.
Where they were dating in Westeros.
Yeah.
Now, before we go too far in 2, I really want to say I want to acknowledge what was great about 1. And what's great about you're looking at me weird. It's a horrible movie. It's a steaming pile of crap. But what's great about it, I feel, are 2 things. Nobody told John Williams that he was scoring a terrible movie.
Okay, yes.
That is one of his best pieces of work.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Absolutely.
I love it, yes.
And the sound design on the pod race.
The sound design in all 3 movies is incredible.
Yes. So there is stuff to like in those movies.
Yes, I'm sorry I gave you that look. The music is amazing.
Turn off the screen and just listen.
Well,
and
the pod race, even though it's story-wise, it's not the best, but it still was the moment in the movie where I was paying attention and on the edge of my seat. Okay, this part is interesting.
See, that was not the case for us. It was kind of all right, they're just fucking driving and there's literally nothing at stake because if they really wanted to take them, they've had no trouble killing people already and there was just
but they're Jedi.
Nothing.
They can't just kill people.
But they fucking do all the time.
I feel like the problem with prequels across the board is that you're painting yourself in a corner. You have to draw connections. You have to tie threads together, and it's always kind of painful. And I think that there was a line in A New Hope where, or maybe it was Jedi, where Obi-Wan says, "When I met your father, he was already a great pilot." And I think they had to make that line work. And so the pod race thing is their way of building in an action sequence while paying off, "When I met your father, he was already a great pilot."
Well, here's the thing that I have to say about that. And internet, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I've always been under the impression and understanding that George Lucas wrote all 6 movies. and he wrote them in order. He went to the studios, and this is what I've always understood, is he went to the studios pitching episode 1 and nobody would take it from him.
I think the case was more like he had broad strokes of an idea. I'm reading a book now where they took his original script treatment before he made revisions and turned it into a comic book, illustrated by Mike Mayhew, who is my absolute favorite artist. And it's very different, but a lot of similarities to A New Hope. So I don't think he had the movies written. In fact, those movies weren't written until Lawrence Kasdan walked in and saved Empire Strikes Back, in my opinion. But I think he did have broad strokes of what he generally thought the stories would be. I don't think they were complete.
I think that sounds more accurate because like looking at the difference between the way the stories are told, it's obvious that they were written at different times. The originals are a lot of like showing, and the prequels are a lot of telling. They're telling you the plot points. They're not
so much exposition to get done.
And then,
all of it.
And then
Yeah.
somehow a lot of neither telling nor showing and just ending a scene before something happened.
Okay. So let's talk about 2. Like, you didn't think 2 was, or you thought 2 is worse than 1?
So problem number 1 with episode 2 is Rapikin Skywalker. Just fucking like
Rapikin Skywalker.
Yeah, I rapes this fucking girl the whole movie, and she's like, "Stop looking at me like that. You're making me uncomfortable."
Yes.
And like he's like, "All right," and then like creeping intensifies. Like it's horrifying.
And then he's like, "You broke me since you kissed me." I'm like, "Bitch, you leaned in for that. Don't even blame her."
That did kind of bother me. Like, he was really very forceful.
It made me uncomfortable, like, because a lot of it was him looking at the camera from her point of view, and I was like, ew, don't look at me that way.
And they kept cutting away from the interesting storyline of like, you know, Obi-Wan doing cool shit and like everyone else doing cool shit, and coming back to this really creepy, disgusting, not a love story, and like wasting half or more of the movie on it. And maybe there was some like better stuff that happened that was like better than episode 1, but those were just a couple of scenes interrupted by this fucking steaming turd of a romance.
Well, okay, here's
Beautifully
the thing
shot.
Here's the thing is, like, the first time I saw that movie, I totally agree with you. I was like, he's such a creeper. He's so gross. Oh my God. He's just like, this love story sucks. Lame. This time, rewatching the movie, first off, I had way more sympathy for Anakin than I ever had when I saw the original movies. For some reason, like, I can't really explain it, but I did, and I enjoyed very much so watching his like slow spiral into evilness. And I don't know why, but I like really enjoyed it. And I think, honestly, to God, good. You thought he was creepy? Good. Because I think the filmmakers wanted you to think he was creepy, because at the end of the day, he's the bad guy.
For lack of a better word, he's headstrong.
Yeah, like that's his character.
That he was creepy isn't the problem. That it just sucked was a problem.
Well,
like,
I think
go ahead.
I think it shouldn't have worked. It's not that he's creepy that's the problem. It's the fact that it works. That he successfully romances her. I'm using rabbit ears in an audio medium. Is just unbelievably. It just falls unbelievably flat. The whole relationship between the two of them.
Yeah.
It's that classic case. You know, the manic pixie dream girl is that classic situation where a male writer writes his wish fulfillment.
Right.
You know, this is probably how George would want his relationships to go.
Is
like
the creepy rapey dream boy the
it's-
opposite of that?
Well, no, it's like it starts off with some woman telling George, "Stop looking at me. You're making me uncomfortable." And his wish fulfillment is that he changes her mind.
With continued and intensifying creepiness.
Yeah.
It's horrifying.
I'm agreeing with you. It's bad writing. It's bad wish fulfillment.
Maybe he inadvertently Jedi mind tricks her for the whole movie.
Oh,
gosh.
That's dark.
That's the darkest
that's very
thing.
dark.
I mean, considering.
And then to a point where she dies at the end when she gives birth to his babies.
Well, I mean, considering that Anakin's mother was force raped, like impregnated with the force, like
Okay, yeah. So there's a thought. The actual interesting part of the plot is that what was Palpatine's master dude's name?
Palpatine's master?
Yeah.
Oh,
His name was Vader Master?
the guy who
Master
could stop
Vader.
people from dying.
Yeah. Okay. So then Palpatine learns how to create life just from the Force, and they reveal earlier that Anakin. It's Palpatine created Anakin Skywalker.
I never made that connection.
Wait, what?
yeah.
Because he was
So-
There's no reason to include all of that info so directly without that being the intention of the reveal.
Yeah, because in the first movie, they ask about Anakin, and she's like, there is no father. And then, he's like wondering how to save Queen Papadala, whatever.
Yeah, Papadala.
And he just straight up says, like,
Yeah.
yo, I can create life. Like,
Interesting. I
He
never made
does.
that
That's
connection.
right.
so that opens up a huge can of worms.
Yeah.
Which is significantly cooler than what they put in the movies.
But it's a
Yeah,
lot of forethought. You know, I can believe that he manipulated certain events, but that he had manipulated those specific events, that specifically is a stretch.
Well, maybe he didn't know how it was going to turn out, but, you use the Force to create a space Jesus. Like, it
But
could
why
go
in
one of
that-
two ways.
But why in Anakin's mother? Like, why her? And she was on this other planet.
The
completely.
midichlorians.
What you're asking is an interesting question that would have resulted in an interesting plot line.
A better
And they
movie.
put it in the movie.
Yeah.
You know, and that reminds me of something that I think I was mentioning to you guys. There's this whole prophecy, and I hate prophecies as a storytelling mechanism, but there's prophecy that he would bring balance to the Force. And then at the end, we're left, oh, you're supposed to bring balance. You didn't bring balance. I think he absolutely brought balance.
Yeah,
because
too many Jedis, right?
Yeah, before there were hundreds of Jedis and one Sith. He brought balance. There were 2 Jedi, 2 Sith, perfectly balanced. I think the problem was the Jedi interpreted that prophecy to mean something that it didn't mean. And absolutely he paid off the prophecy.
Well, the Jedi were like too wrapped up in this Force nonsense because they're like, oh, we can't sense like any fucking evil. And then Obi-Wan's like, yeah, but isn't Palpatine kind of a dick? And like, no one acted on that thought. Like, I mean, they saw he was a dick, and like, but they were like, but he's not a Sith, so I guess we'll just let him fucking dissolve the council and do whatever he wants, and then until like all the way up until like oh he's the fucking dictator now, and they're like, oh, that's fine, and then Anakin comes back, he's like, oh, but by the way, he's also a Sith, and like, oh shit, now we got to overthrow him, like.
Well, in defense, and I truly hate going to this comparison because it's an overused comparison, but I think it was a very intentional mechanism in these movies, is that Palpatine rose to power in the way that Hitler did. Exactly
Absolutely.
the way that Hitler did.
Yeah, he did.
That he controlled the government to the point where he set things up to fall in a certain way so that they had no choice but to give him these emergency powers.
And people were so fearful for war. They didn't want
They
to
needed
go
the
to
protector.
war that they agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then they like dissolve the Trade Federation in the third movie by Anakin walking into a room and killing 10 people. Like, I mean, at any point they could have stopped this without creating a space Hitler.
But they were too afraid of Anakin. They didn't want to.
But I mean, they had like a whole team of Jedi like on the side of the Council, and they really very clearly showed that Anakin walking into this room and killing the Trade Federation dudes was the end of that.
Yeah. He just straight up murderizes them.
Murder rises.
Like there was no problem, and that's why the writing and the movie sucks, is because there was no problem.
Well, you know, so I guess we're kind of on to episode 3 here, and episode 3, as far as the prequels go, certainly is my favorite. And you know, I had a worry. I remember way back when I had a worry going into the prequels that they would too quickly turn Anakin to the dark side. But I found that was unfounded. I think they absolutely earned it. I feel like they really built it. I saw the manipulation I saw him being disenfranchised with the Jedi. I saw the way that the Emperor manipulated him, and I think it worked. I think it paid off. I think Sam disagrees.
I do. I don't know. It felt like he was being manipulated, yes, but I don't feel like they pushed it far enough, and it was just like flipping a light switch. All of a sudden, he was like, "All right, I'm evil now. Okay, I'm just gonna murder kids and." Throw everything away, even though 1 second ago I was saying, don't murder Palpatine.
Well, I disagree because there were some really good scenes where he would do something evil, like when he killed those people who murdered his mom, and there's that great scene where he shows the conflict, and he's like, I know it was wrong, and I know that I'm better than that. And that was the thing for me on this rewatch of the movies that really made me go, oh, and feel for Anakin, because he knows that he's slipping down the slippery slope of evilness.
Slippery slope of evil.
Slippery slope. But he can't help it.
That's the only scene where the turn worked for me is in episode 2, where he takes revenge for his mother's death. And that's what's missing in episode 3 is, in order for the anti-hero thing to work, we have to empathize with him on some level. We have to say, in that scene, we say, well, that was messed up, but I guess I can understand why he would do something like that.
Yeah.
And that was missing in episode 3.
Yeah.
See, I did buy that in episode 3 because I felt like the Emperor put him in a position where, true or not, he believed that was the way to save Padme.
Seconds before the I pledge allegiance to the Hitler was
one
he
mustache
walked into the room being like, we need to arrest him, and then fucking Mace was like, yeah, but no. And then that whole thing happened, going in less than 1 minute from Palpatine's obviously the bad guy and we need to arrest him. And then Palpatine fucking siths him across town. And then it's just all right, I pledge allegiance to you. I'll do your bidding. That's a huge leap compared to those other actually
But it's not just
moments.
that's turned on a coin. That leap has been building up, and the tension and frustration that he's been feeling with the Jedi Council has been building up over the past movie and a half.
Yeah.
Is where the turn needed to happen, but I think my issue with it, and I don't want to get into rewriting their script or whatever, but the problem is that it wasn't his decision. He walked into the room conflicted and then sided with the guy who was left after the struggle.
Yeah.
And
I see what
He
you mean.
hadn't made up his mind.
I actually did buy. I see why you don't, but I did buy it because he had this moment where I'm so conflicted. But if the Emperor dies right now, Padme dies.
Yeah.
And that flipped the
and he did
switch.
chop off Mace's hand.
And that set up what I think is a even more beautiful scene in Return of the Jedi after you've seen the prequels, was they put Luke in that position. Pick up the lightsaber, strike me down, and your turn will be complete. And we now have seen how quickly that turn can happen, that we were very much afraid for Luke. He was in so much danger of losing his soul the way that his father did. And it takes one little turn and you're on the path to the dark side.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was kind of interesting because we just watched Return of the Jedi last night, that I think I made that comment where I was like, Luke had to make the same decision his father did. And it's really interesting to see them in the similar positions, but Anakin, makes the wrong decision, unfortunately. But
and I think Luke's veering over the line that whole scene.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I
that's
think
why it works.
I think he makes the choice that we want Vader to make. He makes the choice that we want Anakin to make. And he flipped on a coin. Unfortunately, he had to, but right.
The revenge for the mother's death in episode 2 was visceral. That was something that was easy to buy. In episode 3, he has maybe a vision that Padme is going to die, and then the Emperor explains half a story in a room with a big ovary in the middle and semen floating around it. It's
It's opera.
It's right. It's so expository, him just sitting there. Maybe there was this legend about some guy who, and maybe we could figure it out. I don't know. It's so vague. And Anakin decides to murder children as a result of this scene. I mean,
agreed.
Go ahead.
But I'm a big fan of individual lines throughout the series. And that line, can I learn this power? Not from a Jedi. That line lands.
I'm not saying that the three movies are devoid of any good ideas.
Yeah.
It's just execution that was lacking.
It's also confusing why he waited until like that later scene and not the opera scene, where Palpatine's like, "Have you heard this story about the Sith guy?
Right.
I know a fucking lot about this story." And he's just like, "Oh, that was a cool story." And then later on, he's like, "Wait, this is the second time you've brought up the Sith. What's going on here?" And
to make a counter argument though, Ian, is you say oh, it's too easy for him to flip on a coin and kill children, but killing the Jedi children was not the first time he went and killed children. When he got revenge for his mother, he says to Padme, "I killed the women and children too. I killed all of them. I slaughtered them." So I think that, it really wasn't that far of a jump for him because he'd already done such a hateful, spiteful thing.
True, but what Ian's saying, it's lacking the motive that the mother scene had. The mother scene had the motive. It had the emotion behind it. This is just I was on
happen. Anakin's side in the mom scene.
That bit was simple and visceral, and
this is the wrong thing, but I feel it.
And the build up in episode 3 felt contrived. Is the word that I would use for
or the fact that she dies too. Padme, finally we get to the birth scene and she dies and they're the doctor's well, I don't know what's wrong. She's perfectly healthy, but she's dying.
I'm just a
and it's
droid
really?
doctor.
You couldn't come up with a reason?
Well, no, the line was, "We don't know what's wrong with her. I guess she's lost the will to live."
Could we just have a reason?
Also,
even just giving birth, that's a perfectly legitimate reason for someone to die.
Out 2 babies.
Come on.
well, they wanted it to be this weird thing where he was the cause of death for the one he loved, and
right, but it just didn't land.
Exactly, it was horrible.
Can you trust it? Because the way we find out that he was the cause of death is Palpatine being you killed her.
Yeah,
Can you imagine being in that surgery room? All right, time of death, 1:30, cause of death, Anakin Skywalker.
The Force.
Yeah, so, if you use the Force roofie idea from episode 2, then
the toxins built up.
Perhaps he was in some way using that to fulfill what he thought was going to happen. I mean, if he's in some way driven unconsciously to use the Force in that way, maybe that fits with that sort of theory, I think. You can get away with anything when you just rely on space magic when it comes to storytelling.
The interesting thing is, though, that he does kind of fulfill his own vision.
Right.
He has this vision.
It's the self-fulfilling prophecy.
But was that a surprise or a reveal in any way?
Not really.
No.
To him, not to us.
Yeah, I mean, but it's supposed to be a reveal to us because it's a movie. I want to be surprised. I want to enjoy it. I don't want to just here's what's gonna. Oh yeah. By the way, all of the prequels. Here's what's not gonna happen. Instantly, it happens.
So
every scene.
So you want to be surprised, and I think that is the perfect segue.
Well, before we do the segue,
okay,
just one more thing I want to say.
So perfect. Yeah. Go ahead.
My favorite Jedi in the entire series is the one little kid Jedi when Jimmy Smits shows up at the Jedi Temple.
You're all dumb and I'm smart and I'm 5.
All the Jedi kids are dead except this one fucking badass little kid Jedi who's flipping and killing clone troopers left and right. That's my
I
favorite.
thought you were talking about the one in I think it's episode 2 where Obi-Wan comes in to ask Yoda. Yeah, and the little kid's well, somebody erased it from the computer, obviously. And Yoda and Obi-Wan are oh, yeah, I guess you're right. That makes a lot of sense.
Before we segue, sorry. I have to mention 2 more things. One, I really, really hated the heavy-handed visual cue that Anakin was dressed in black as a Jedi and everyone was in brown.
That
I
was a
wanted to
little
punch
much.
it. And then when you thought that he was maybe going to be good, his robes were suddenly brown. And then
For one scene.
and then he was back to black robes. And
That was his laundry
here-
day.
he was-
Agreed, but
He was in brown, left to go to Palpatine, and when he got there, he was wearing black. He changed in the car.
agreed,
Use his
but
Jedi magic.
how great was that later when we saw Luke all in black and you started to get a little worried?
Well, I didn't
That-
watch them
that
in
makes-
that order, so
Right, but yeah, I do kind of like that. Also, who else changed in the car? As soon as Han Solo is frozen in carbonite, Lando Calrissian is in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon wearing Han Solo's clothes.
Is it possible that Jedi robes are kind of like mood rings? Like they just kind of.
oh my gosh. Oh, so
great.
Oh,
so we
Anakin's
have
black again. Everyone, avoid him. Avoid him. Don't make eye contact.
So we have been shitting on this movie, but I do want to compliment it on something, and that is that Christopher Lee and Butchin Palpatine did amazing jobs acting.
Yeah.
Those guys are
For
great.
once. It could just be that the other acting was so bad that looked so much
Oh,
better.
the
but it
acting's
was
got so much better across the board
Oh,
from
yeah.
episode
Yeah,
2 on.
Definitely.
But yeah, you got
But it's-
Christopher Lee in there.
Christopher Lee made me feel like watching his scenes was like, this is what the movie could have been.
Yeah.
Like he took even the worst motivations and the worst lines and just fucking like acted the shit out
He
of
was
them.
Dooku, right?
Yeah.
Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And also Peter Cushing in the first Star Wars movie. Like you got those old Hammer horror movie fucking actors. Those guys, I think they anchored some stuff.
So,
I was so surprised.
yes. Speaking of surprise, have you guys seen this video? I know I
boy.
made Nick see it. I don't know. I should have made you see it. There's this amazing video online. Look it up. About an entire theory that Jar Jar Binks is secretly the Sith master the whole time. Or at least he's secretly a Sith working for Palpatine.
Or he was intended to be that, but George changed
yes.
his mind based on how much people hated him in the
Which
first movie.
makes sense. Point number one, Count Dooku comes out of fucking nowhere. Comes out of nowhere in episode 2. Number 2, like, you see Jar Jar become less and less and less to the point that in the third movie, we only have one close-up shot of his face and he never says a word.
Thank God.
Take those favors.
But perhaps he was secretly supposed to be an evil Sith the whole time, and the battle with Dooku and Yoda was actually supposed to be a battle with Jar Jar and Yoda.
I hear what you're saying, and I've heard
think
this
it's
theory,
bullshit.
but I am disgusted and repulsed by the thought.
But here's the thing. Okay, here's the really interesting thing. If that was true, wouldn't we all have loved to see Jar Jar die? Wouldn't have you just been like,
I think I would have
"Thank
enjoyed the
fucking
turn."
God.
But it would have been so much more torture, at least, like having Christopher Lee be that character. I was like, wow, this is really good acting. I'm actually engaged
it
for
would have been
about
so
4 minutes out of this 2-hour
If it was
movie.
CG Jar Jar.
I think that clearly there's a gray area wherein the truth lies. I do not buy everything in
Yeah.
that video.
Misa Sith Lord.
There's
Misa
some
gonna kill you,
interesting
Okide.
stuff.
Just also, Jar Jar is always seen standing next to Palpatine, even like before he's supposed to know him. There's just like every shot that has both of them. They're always right next to each other.
There's
Yeah.
a couple of shots too where his lips are moving while someone else is speaking to suggest that maybe he's force
Using
controlling
force.
them.
Yeah.
So he can control people's minds, but he's one of those people who moves their lips when they talk, when they read.
Yeah, exactly. He says Jar Jar's key. If we can get Jar Jar working, this is gonna work. He's also a much funnier character than we've ever had before. It's poop jokes. It's literally poop jokes.
Yeah.
Like,
He's the least funny character.
Well, I'd heard somewhere George was saying, yeah, Gungan is a word that my kids made up.
Yeah.
Like, he was clearly catering to children.
well,
yeah, and you had. Oh, Go
No,
ahead.
it's funny how episode 1 sort of poisons the rest of the things. You've got this kid character stepping in poop and making fart jokes, and yet you have this tedious, boring Senate scenes about trade disputes and
Yeah.
is it for kids, or then who are those politics
Who's this
scenes
movie
for?
for?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think this is a
Sorry,
good
I didn't mean to
opportunity.
interrupt.
No.
I think this is a good opportunity to move on to the original
Okay,
series.
before we move on, because I have so much less to say about the original series.
Okay. I have so much more.
So, okay, after he leaves the planet in the first movie, they sell his mom to
yeah.
Owen Lars.
Lars, yeah. And they then later on we're introduced to fucking Aunt Beru while in the same scene with 3PO, and she doesn't recognize him in episode 4 when they show up
Yes,
again.
I have
Ash
that
brought
point
up,
too.
But every protocol droid looks the same.
But not every
disagree,
protocol droid is like a fucking sassy gay British man. Like,
Well, did anybody else notice? Interesting fact, and maybe it was just me because I brought it up last night, and Bryce and Nick didn't seem to have noticed. I'm curious to know if you've noticed, Ian. C-3PO is not 100% gold. His right shin is still silver. And the interesting thing, and through all 3
Unimportant
movies of the
details.
original, well, I'm just, why they made that decision in the original 3 movies, who the fuck knows?
They ran out of
But the interesting thing is, in the prequels, did they go, C-3PO had this gold right leg? Did
yeah.
someone pick up on that and go, or silver, and did someone pick up on that and go, well, let's give him silver for these, and then maybe over the years he had his body parts replaced with gold, like you would have a filling replaced. But I just thought it was interesting that something that I never noticed before, that his right shin is silver.
See, that's like clever, but that's what Ian was talking about, how it just feels really contrived. Like, why waste your time on that level of detail when you don't even know the motives of your own characters?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they paint themselves in the corner of drawing threads together from
Yeah.
prequel to original.
Before we get into the original trilogy, the one thing I want to mention is for anyone who is wanting to binge the series but can't bring themselves to sit down and watch the prequels, I actually sat and watched the Phantom edit, which is available on YouTube. There's a 1080p version that a fan has taken and trimmed all 3 movies into a single 2-hour movie. And it is spectacular. I mean,
That sounds like the Topher Grace cut.
it's very similar, and it's extremely well done. He redid all the titles. So in transitions, where he cuts out a huge piece of time, he'll say 10 years later on Coruscant, so on and so forth. But the movie begins with a title crawl that just summarizes the broad strokes of the Phantom Menace and starts with the saber sequence and Liam Neeson dying. And then it transitions immediately into the first scene with Anakin and Obi-Wan in episode 2.
I'm in. That sounds awesome.
It
Yeah.
is so much better. And the final saber sequence, which went on so long to the point of just meaninglessness, where they're banging sabers together in the third one for 45 minutes, now has meaning and purpose. They cut it. It's I think it's now like 3 or 4 minutes long, and they cut shots down to specific scenes out. It's very well done. And Attack of the Clones is only 40 minutes of the movie.
Okay.
Well, I'm totally down.
Did they
That sounds
include the amazing Jango Fett beatdown of Obi-Wan?
That was pretty cool.
I think so, yes.
awesome. You mean
I
where
think
he would have?
of the whole
Yeah.
prequels, that was my favorite thing.
That
Well,
was a pretty
yeah,
cool
it's a
fight
good scene.
What the edit does is it makes the movie's main character one person and one person only, and that's Anakin. It significantly trims out everything else. I mean, that was the main problem with Phantom Menace. There's no
Yeah.
main character. Is it Liam Neeson? Is
Absolutely.
it Ewan McGregor? Ewan McGregor's on the ship for half of the scene in Tatooine. And by cutting all of that superfluous junk out, it really, like we said, the movies are not devoid of good ideas. There are good ideas in there. He just trims out so much of the fat. So if you're looking for a way of binging all 6 episodes before you go see the new one, I would go Phantom Edit and then
I really want to watch
4
this.
through 7.
Yeah, I do too.
So, okay, I think this is a great opportunity for us to take a little breath and segue to the original trilogy.
Jar Jar Binks, no.
So I want to kick this off myself. I'm gonna claim this one because most people you talk to will say that the best Star Wars movie is Empire Strikes Back. But I'm gonna come out of the gate and say the best Star Wars movie is the original Star Wars movie, the movie that was released in theaters in 1977 under the title Star Wars. The movie that we now know of as A New Hope, I think, is the best movie. It's the one movie where it stands alone. If we didn't have any of the other movies, we'd still have a great masterpiece. That one is absolutely my favorite, and yeah, so I'm just throwing that out there as a place to get started.
Star Wars, guys.
I
I like Star Wars.
I'd like to, if we can, because I have not prepped anything for this thought, but can we elementally break down like why you think the original is better than Empire?
Yeah, because if you talk about that standard 3-act structure in your archetypal hero's journey, I think that the original Star Wars movie is one of the best templates, one of the best examples of the hero's journey.
I do agree with you there. I do think you make a very good point.
A complete somebody who has no knowledge of this bigger, and he's got some knowledge. He has a thirst to join in, but he doesn't know much. He has an incredible call to action.
Well, he has the biggest
call to action.
He has the biggest character arc in that film than he does out of all the others. And I think, like you were saying, Ian, about New Hope, like who's the main character? You could almost kind of make that same argument for the other 2 movies, like Empire especially. Like who's the main character?
Right.
It focuses more on Han and Leia than it does on actual Luke.
Yeah, she just said Leia. We'll get to that. So yeah, it's absolutely Luke's story. Call to action. He denies the call.
We're talking about episode 1, so I had to say Leia instead of Leia.
We're talking about episode 4.
Or episode 4, sorry.
Yeah. Call to action. He denies the call to action. He's pushed into the story. He has that incredible growth to where he is the ultimate hero. He
is the ultimate hero. Sorry.
Yeah. There are concepts and structure to the hero's journey that I'm missing here on the spot, but I think it most exemplifies that.
Well, yeah, everything. It's even got the wise old man. Yeah.
I think that's kind of the reason why I think episode 2 is the best, but on the broader strokes of the trilogy versus the first movie, because shit doesn't ever get too dark in the first one, except for his call to action thing with the
Pretty dark.
Yeah, that's dark, but there's never like the pit of despair part of the hero's journey really in the first one. Like they kind of like the final fight gets a little rough or whatever, but there's never really like
That's true.
that moment, and like fucking Empire gets super heavy on him.
So if you look at the 3 movies of the original series as the entire hero's journey, you do have that pit of despair in Empire, which is perhaps
I think
why
that's the
people love it.
perspective. Yeah.
So the thing I want to talk about, though, and it's hard to include Brett and Sam in this conversation just because you guys watched it release order, but watching the series in episodic order was I think the main reason why Nick and I looked at each other and we said, we need to do this podcast, because for me, it was such a crazy revelation. Like I hadn't really seen the original, or I hadn't really seen the newer 3 in a while, and so it was so shocking to me to see those and see that episode 2 and 3 were not as bad, in my opinion, that I remembered, and that episode 3 I actually really, really liked, and I was shocked to like see that, because I expected that I was just going to hate all 3 of them. So that was shocking to me. But the bigger thing that was shocking to me that was even more shocking and just crazy, was going from episode 3 to episode 4, A New Hope, is such a hard thing to do. And like at the end of the day, they do not work in episodic order. It's such a hard turn to like, suddenly we're at the 70s low quality film, and
so this is another one of those cases where I absolutely see what you're talking about, but disagree.
Yeah.
I 100% can flip that switch and disregard the production quality that you've got a difference of 30 years.
Yeah, I also feel like, having watched them in release order, I didn't have the feeling that you felt where you're like, oh, the other world is so unfleshed out. We had the feeling, we said multiple times throughout each film, like, this is not the Star Wars universe. Why are there these weird flying cars? Why are there all these screens? Why are there advertisements? Why are there these big cities? This is not the right universe.
There's things about it that just like, for example, like his whole, stay on target tracking system in his plane. Like when it cut to the insert of that, Bryce and I just bust out laughing, because that visual graphic on his airplane nowadays in a modern day, audience is so laughable looking.
But I would like to throw out there that the reason that was funny is because it pulled you out of an otherwise really like engaging moment. Whereas in the prequels, there was so much shitty CG everywhere that nothing surprised me as being worse than anything else, because it all sucked.
Yeah,
well,
I
I'm not
couldn't
saying
relate
that
to...
I'm not saying the prequels are better. Like that's not what I'm trying to say at all. What I'm
But
just
like
trying to
going
say
from
is like
the prequel graphics to the 70s graphics, the 70s graphics felt better to me.
I think absolutely everyone would agree with you on that. If the prequels looked more like, I think the prequels in some way soured most people on CG, or soured a lot of people on CG just because of its dramatic overuse and constant green screen. So I think, of course, definitely it would. And the color palette in those first, in the prequels, is dramatically more saturated than
and sharp. Everything is in sharp focus.
Yeah, even on Tatooine, the pod race scene, everything is very rich.
Because rendering blurs is expensive.
Oh yeah,
right,
and time consuming.
The digital process versus the chemical process with episodes 3 through 6, or rather 4 through. I'm getting the numbers out messed up, but I do agree with you. How long had it been since you'd seen A New Hope?
I really don't remember. Like I think it has been since I was a child, because my father loves Star Wars.
Yeah.
He absolutely loves Star Wars, and he has branded that love into me, and to the point that I remember buying him like the VHSs for Christmas, like the special edition VHS box set. And like I really think that the last time I saw them, I saw the box set, and I'm not 100% sure if I've even ever seen the newer special edition version or not. I don't think I've ever seen the scene where Han doesn't shoot first. I'm not sure.
I think that definitely has a mitigating effect in what you're describing. I've seen those movies every couple of years since I was 6. And so I've never had that, what it was in my imagination as a child versus now experience, because I've sort of grown up reconsuming that media. Mm-hmm. So, my expectations are very grounded in a recent experience whenever I go back and watch them.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so excited about the new movie, because all of the trailers and everything, it looks so much like the original trilogy.
Natural.
It looks
natural.
Yeah, that's one thing I really respect about those filmmakers, is that they have come out and said, like, if we can do it traditionally, we're going to try. And as somebody who passionately loves stop motion and has worked in stop motion, like, yay, thank you. And tangible effects, please come back.
I'm surprised Nick hasn't mentioned the machete order.
So there's somebody who's got a blog called Machete something or another, and he proposes this order that you should watch the movies in order of 4, 5, 2, 3, 6, and don't even bother with 1. So you start with A New Hope, you go to Empire Strikes Back, you've got that pit of despair, then you have this surprise, Vader is the father. Then you go to a flashback. Episodes 2 and 3 play as a flashback. You're left with, oh my God, he's the father? Well, let me explain to you how that works. You get 2 and 3, then you come back, and you just saw Anakin turn at the end of 3. You come back for Return of the Jedi with Luke in black, and now you're so scared he's going to turn.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, that's
If
brilliant.
you know somebody who's never seen them, I think Machete Order is the way to go. Also, no episode 1 because you just don't need it. Not just because it's a bad movie, but because you just don't need it.
Yeah, there's nothing. It actually just makes things worse. I mean, one of the attractions of the series is that anyone can use space magic if they focus hard enough. And then midichlorians in the first one just kind of ruined that whole thing.
The only thing I will say that the first one does do, and like, I'm not saying that he's not still creepy, but if you didn't watch the first one, I think Anakin would come off way creepier. Even more creepy if he's like, hey, this is crazy. I just met you, but let's fuck. Right? Like,
Maybe
I
that
don't
works
know.
for the story.
I
If he's
disagree.
creepy, it works.
Yeah, having not seen the first one would have been so much better, because then you're not like, ew, he's like a kid and she's way
that's true.
older. This
Yeah.
is gross.
that
I
was
don't
pretty
think
crazy.
she was that much older. She was the childlike
Actually,
princess,
we
you know,
looked it
childlike
up,
queen.
and she was supposed to be 13 or 14 in episode
Yeah.
1,
And
but
they
she
got-
doesn't look
they
it
got
at all.
like an 20-year-old actress to
Yeah.
play a 13-year-old.
They should have
Yeah.
specified ages to make us feel a little better about
Again, like Christopher Lee and
that. Cedar Cushing?
it proves that the casting really could have been like so much better, and
They
like
just didn't care.
I feel like, having watched these again as an adult, because I haven't seen the prequels in so long, like, that had the casting been on point, the prequels could have been good.
Plus, if you didn't see episode 1, you also, Dooku wouldn't come out of left field so much because he would be established right away.
Well, that or it matters less because given it's a flashback, you're really only interested in the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan and him turning evil. So the whole universe story and the politics and all of that just matter less because you're already focused in on Vader as a result of episode 2. And I think too, rather as a flashback than a linear progression, the tone that you're describing, the tonal shift, would mean less because your palette is sort of
I agree.
prepped with New Hope and Empire.
On that subject of like changing your perspective, having not seen episode 2 or 3, you know, the 2 movies that really influenced the originals, I'm in this weird state of not knowing how I feel about the original 3 because I have all this weird backstory. And I feel like it has totally changed my perspective. And if I were to go back and watch the movies now, I might watch them differently. And I'm not sure I'm okay with that.
Yeah, like, did we need that backstory?
I don't feel like I did, and I'm a little sad. It kind of has left a weird taste in my mouth.
Yeah.
It was very interesting watching the new ones again with that backstory, in my opinion, because
It's a
like,
different experience.
yeah, it's like, you know, the whole time you're like, well, of course Vader wants to find Luke, you know, and they're like, that moment when Luke's like, he was, you know, they're like, oh, he wasn't after Leia and Han, you know, no, he was after Luke, and they're all like, what? Why? You know, they're all confused, and you're like, of course he was, because he's his son, and it made Vader like such a more fleshed out character to me, which was kind of interesting. Like, you know, it made him seem more like a human than just this like scary dude in a mask. Like, you know, he is a little bit stereotypical in the first 2 films, you know, until we find out his motives, and so it gave all of his actions motives, which
I found really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I like him better as this weird, awesome, evil thing that just wants to do evil.
Which, how badass is it? I have the line written down in Return of the Jedi. The Emperor is coming here, and Vader says, the Emperor is not as forgiving as I am. When you've built up Vader as the end-all, be-all of ultimate evil, and he says, the Emperor is not as forgiving as I am. That's a fucking line right there.
And in my opinion, seeing the newer films too, and then seeing that line is like, fuck, we've seen how fucking crazy Anakin it can be. He kills children, and to be like, he's not as forgiving as I am. Like, he killed slaughtered like an entire village because they kidnapped his,
Like, totally
mother
for no reason.
Yeah.
Well, not
Well,
no
no,
reason.
not the village, but he killed like the kids for no
The
reason.
younglings.
Because Palpatine ordered it.
So I'd love to transition to Empire Strikes Back, and I want to offer a little thesis statement for conversation. I can almost buy into this idea that Empire's the better movie, because what I want to say is Yoda is the best executed and most important puppet performance that has ever been put on film. Second place goes to Audrey 2 in Little Shop of Horrors. But I think that is a beautiful, heart-wrenching, pure performance from a puppet. And I think that Frank Oz crushed it. And yeah, so I just wanted to I think that Yoda is the heart of Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I agree. And coming from somebody who's actually like watched puppeteers, these little things, it's really fascinating to think of these puppets as actors, as living things. And that's how the puppeteers think of them. They don't look at Yoda and think, oh, it's a cute little Yoda puppet. They're like, okay, this is a character and he's feeling and thinking. And that definitely comes through in the movie.
And I don't have any quotes or background on this, but I feel like Irving Kershner directed him as a person.
Yeah.
Never for a moment thought of him as a puppet.
Absolutely.
The way he's framed, the way, he'll turn to camera, and absolutely a real performance.
Well, yeah, the camera is, whenever you're on Yoda, the camera is eye level with Yoda, and it's never looking down. It's always eye level.
That's
with
interesting.
Yoda
I never
as
noticed
you
that.
would,
Yeah.
a normal human being.
Which
But
is
also
something
the
you
scene in Jedi when he's snuggled up in bed and he dies and he rolls away from Luke, and we've got a great shot of Yoda facing away from Luke, close up facing away, and then rolls back. A performance that a human would have given that is just delicious.
So sorry, go ahead, Ian.
That movie is so freaking tense. I mean, and I think that's one of the reasons why when I was a kid, I loved Star Wars and Jedi. And as I grew older, I just grew to appreciate Empire. The end of that movie, the fight between the two of them, is the stuff of nightmares. Because he's so outmatched by Vader, to the point where Vader just puts down his lightsaber and just starts mind throwing things at Luke, and he just falls out a freaking window. That actually gave me nightmares because he's the shark. I mean, he is the shark, just completely terrifying in that scene.
And also, John Williams took you there.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, the score is just so iconic. Everything about those movies.
I believe that every flaw you find in A New Hope, John Williams and Lawrence Kasdan came in and made that series. I don't think Lawrence Kasdan gets the respect that he deserves, but Lawrence Kasdan wrote the screenplay for Empire Strikes Back based on George's idea. Between Kasdan and Williams, that's where you got the movie.
Well, the other thing for me personally that made Empire just so phenomenally great, besides that, I think you make a great point there, is the cinematography. And out of all 6 films, in my opinion, Empire has the most beautiful lighting and cinematography I have ever seen. And seeing it in stark contrast right next to Return of the Jedi. In my opinion, Return of the Jedi, everything is lit very flat. Everything is overlit. It's very bright. But Empire has this contrast to it, and it has a lot of the cinematic Hollywood look of, orangey tones in the foreground and cool in the back. And there's even this great wide shot of the Millennium Falcon, and the bottom of it is all lit with tungsten light, and the top is lit with daylight, and it gives it this beautiful look. And it's, to me, Empire is the look of Star Wars. Empire is the look of space. Empire's got that just beautiful, beautiful tones to it. And on top of that, in my opinion, and it might not be the popular opinion in the group, but in my opinion, I love the focus more on Han and Leia's love story.
Yeah.
I love the subtleties that we get. There's he gets credit for being a little less creepy than Anakin. Yeah, and in the beginning of the film, there's just some really great close-ups of Carrie Fisher where she's just giving Han these looks, and there's no dialogue. She's not saying anything, but there's just these really powerful. I think it's when he comes into the control room in Hoth and he says I'm leaving, to somebody else, and she just pissed. Turns and looks, and you just get this beautiful close-up of her that's beautifully lit and everything, and she doesn't have to say anything. You just know what she's thinking. And that sort of directing and cinematography, I don't feel like you see as much in the other films.
Watch some Cameron Crowe movies. The story being told through glances. Speaking of cinematography and just storytelling through an amazing shot, one of my favorite shots in the whole series, the very first shot in A New Hope is this, oh my God, that's an amazingly big ship going across frame. In the beginning of Empire Strikes Back, you've got 3 Star Destroyers, and then you've got shadows being cast across these Star Destroyers. And then you see the Executor, the flagship Star Destroyer, to amp things up, to make things bigger. That was a shot, just casting shadows across these unbelievably large ships.
And that's an excellent example of showing and not telling. Yeah. They didn't say it's the biggest ship in the galaxy. Yeah. It could shadow your fighter jet and,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they show
it's
it.
Filmmaking
and they make you feel what the characters in those ships are feeling, which is this sense of dread and oh my God, how are we going to win this?
So speaking of our traditional visual effects, Sam, I want to ask you, you might know, the AT-AT walkers in Hoth, were those made by Harryhausen's team? They felt very Harryhausen stop motion.
I believe they were Henson. You're talking about the things that they climb into.
The big walkers.
Yeah. The ones that they cut and have to live inside during the night, right?
No. When they have to take them down with the tow cable. The big mechanical Empire walkers.
The AT-ATs.
Oh, AT-AT. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good question.
But whether it's Harryhausen or not, it felt like Harryhausen, and it felt like, again, very tactile, real objects.
They are stop motion. I can kind of. Definitely. I remember seeing that.
Tactile, real, the worst form of transportation.
Yeah. And when they put those into the forest in Endor, the 4-legged AT-AT walker in amongst the trees is dumb.
Before we move on, there's just 2, in my opinion, pretty big things that I think need to be talked about.
You get 30 seconds.
And that is character names. And in A New Hope, Princess Leia. Okay, in A New Hope, everyone calls her Princess Leia. But in the rest of the movies, everyone calls her Princess Leia. So
I never caught that.
It's a regional dialect thing.
Everybody, Han.
You mean Han?
Han? Yeah, and I bring up the second point is that Han, his name is pronounced different ways throughout the movie.
No, it's not. It's only Lando that calls him Han.
Yeah.
Come on, Han, old buddy, don't let me down.
But
enjoy some Colt 45.
And that was the crazy thing for us, though, as we were watching episode 1, or not episode 1, we were watching New Hope. We're like, Leia? What the fuck? Why is everyone calling her Leia? I thought it was Leia.
Here's what I think is they'd only seen her name on paper, and they were saying it wrong. And because there were more important things going on. She didn't find the time to correct them until between episode 1 and 2, or 4 and 5.
That bitch is
you know,
polite.
guys. Now that we destroyed the first Death Star, I just have something to tell you.
You've been saying my name.
It's actually Leia. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I just
A New Hope ends with them getting those awards, and Luke turns around and says, "Thanks, Leia," and she's like, "You know what?"
and Chewbacca's like,
So jumping over to Return of the Jedi, I'm a big fan of the Ocean's 11 heist in which the movie begins. Like basically they're infiltrating Jabba's palace, you know, just like, you know, Brad Pitt and George Clooney, and putting their people in place. And another spot where I think is kind of one of those core lines that kills me, also punctuated by John Williams bringing it. They're about to drop them in the Sarlacc pit, and they've got that music. Boom, 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 like that amazing. And Luke says, Jabba, this is your last chance. They're about to throw him in the Sarlacc pit. And he's like, this is your last chance. That is a beautiful moment. And that's when, for me, Luke became the Jedi.
Yeah, that was excellent.
Yeah.
I have this amazing ability where I can watch the original Star Wars movies and forget a lot of the details like instantly.
Yeah, me too. I didn't remember much of it.
I feel like it makes me a bad fan, but at the same time, it's like I'm remembering awesome stuff as it's happening, and like
I was like, I remember the bullet points.
Yeah.
Like I remember the important things.
The most undignified death in the entire bi-trilogy is Boba Fett,
Who was
just
like the most badass guy, right?
fucking
yeah.
like just I don't know, like tripping into the Sarlacc. Like
No, it was Han's half blind, accidentally hits him, he flies and he dies. Han could have punctuated by saying, "Oh, me's a clumsy."
Yeah, I hate to go there, but I kind of think another interesting aspect of the machete order that we were talking about is that Return of the Jedi is the first time you can kind of see the prequels coming, between the slapstick death of this intimidating bounty hunter to the Ewoks dropping rocks on walkers in the jungle, and the crazy celebration at the end where they're hitting the helmets and all of that.
I hated that.
Oh yeah.
You can see the prequels coming in that movie.
I'm in a minority where I love the Ewoks, and I'll tell you why. And this is before I saw episode 1. This is why I thought Jar Jar was going to work. I love the idea of the innocent. And there's a moment during the battle where the Ewoks start, you know, really raging and starting to turn it. And there's 2 Ewoks. They both go down in an explosion. One Ewok stands up, starts running. He's like, "Hey, come on." And then he realizes that other Ewok's dead. And he drops to his knees and he has that moment.
He
and
moans.
The tears are in my eye. They are innocents in this conflict.
Yeah, they're
And
children fighting that war.
That's why I love the Ewoks.
And so we've beaten this horse beyond death. But the Ewoks were literal teddy bears.
Right.
And I mean, maybe that could have worked with Jar Jar had he been not a fucking cartoon and like
Eyes on stalks.
yeah, like I mean, like not CG. Like if there was a real
Yeah.
Jar Jar in the movie, there was no reason for there not to be a real Jar Jar. He was just a walking around character. He didn't have something that couldn't have been like a costume on
Yeah.
him.
Yeah, I mean,
There
look
was
at
no
the
reason.
look at the I forget his name, but it's a trap guy. Like,
Admiral Akbar.
Yeah.
like, does he look that much different than Jar Jar? Not really. Like,
Looks
you
that much
could
better.
have done it practically for sure.
But it's also his character too.
Right.
That Admiral Akbar as a character takes himself seriously. Jar Jar as a character
it's
doesn't.
always a cartoon.
He's
Yeah,
always
and
slapstick.
It's like in the movie where there's a bunch of humans walking around and having like human conversations. There's someone's like shitty racist imaginary friend. Like it doesn't fit and it's wrong. And the Ewoks worked because they're like cuddly and cute and real.
I will argue that they worked better
You didn't like
Well, okay,
them, Sam?
no, they work better. I know I don't like the Ewoks either, but but like Smokey the Bear versus the new Smokey the Bear.
Okay.
Right? You know what I'm talking
There's
about.
a new Smokey the
We don't
Bear?
even care about
he's
Smokey
a
the Bear.
horrifying CG, like, I don't know. It was anyway. CG
Anyway.
is bad.
So I'm a sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
So I'm a really big fan in that whole battle on Endor. There's just a tiny little moment where shit starts going down. Chewbacca picks up a stormtrooper and throws him at a stormtrooper. If that's not the most badass maneuver in a fight.
Well, I just have to say that I agree with you, Nick. I like the Ewoks, and I've always liked the Ewoks. I think now that I'm older and like seeing it in a second watch, like I can see, some faults as far as you can point out, Brett and Sam, but I still at the end of the day love the Ewoks, and I think I'll always like the Ewoks. What I really love about the Ewoks is I love the idea, and I think it goes with what you're saying, Nick, the innocent, is I love the idea that this empire and the emperor, there's that great line where the emperor's like, talking to Luke, and he's like, your friends have already lost. Like, I've got all these troops, like they've, there's no way they're getting that shield down or whatever. And just, it's so great that it's like, here's this big, powerful empire, but they're completely underestimating the innocent and the power in that. And I think there's something really great in that. And I think it's really cool that it's like, imagine that ending without the Ewoks. I'm not so sure that fight on Endor would have worked as well.
Imagine their Wookiees instead. A million times
Which
better.
I think was the original idea, and they felt like they couldn't pull it off.
Because there's
tragic.
this thing where I think the real problem is like the Ewoks could work if Empire was a movie that was its own movie and not part of this franchise. But
The Ewok
You mean,
Adventure.
it's a
yeah,
movie.
the Ewok Adventure. But the way I look at the original trilogy is they are one movie. And with the setup of the first one and the darkness of the second one, and some of these like the really like heart-wrenching moments in Empire, like before they get up to the ship when Luke and Vader have their heart-to-heart before he turns them over to the Emperor, and like that's a really powerful scene. And like Vader, like Luke walks away and is taken away by the guards, and Vader has this like fucking like he's wearing a mask and you can feel his pain.
Yes.
And like it's so good. And then like that plot line and the real humanness of it, and like how like real emotions are there, and then they cut away to these fucking teddy bears.
I was a little bummed at that point, like, take your lightsaber, strike me down, and your turn will be complete. He snatches it with the Force. He swings. Vader's lightsaber comes out of nowhere, blocks it. Boom. Emperor starts laughing. Cut to Ewoks. Like, I did not want to cut away from that. I don't care about Ewoks at that
levity.
point.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Unnecessary levity. That's the way I would describe it. There's none of that in A New Hope.
Empire.
There's none of that in Empire. The only C-3PO is the only what I would say unnecessary levity in the series, but he's key to the story. And the Ewoks are just sort of there, as though we need to lighten up the tone or something to that effect, as opposed to just telling the story. And it doesn't fit because they're not actual characters in that.
Wicked's the character.
Yeah.
I
love
do-
it.
I
totally
Wicked is
agree.
a character. I agree with you.
I do agree with you,
Agree with
Sam, that I think had they been Wookiees, it would have been rad. But
Yeah.
my
been
point
rad.
still stands. I think that like just the fact that the Empire, whether they are Wookiees or Ewoks, the fact that the Empire doesn't even like regard them as a threat because they're these beings that are under them.
But they didn't regard anyone as a threat. That was the whole thing. Was the Empire was just like, we got this. And like that's why they lost the first battle, because they're like, they're sending fucking like one man ships at us. Okay,
They don't see them as a threat, but they also don't see them as having any value. Like, We
Yeah.
just don't care whether they get
I guess
slaughtered.
my point is
And
like
that's
they don't
huge
see
to
them
me.
as people, and the fact that like that's the point that I'm trying to make is like, and I think that's why the Ewoks are supposed to be like these sort of Aborigine forest people, is like it's this evil corporation empire thing that doesn't even see these underlings, these primal beings, as beings.
But that's how they treat all people. I don't know. I just feel like tonally it doesn't fit.
Didn't need it.
And it's
Yeah, was there, like, weird
unnecessary.
Avatar plot.
And also,
just thinking that.
it's like I don't know. It's almost degrading to how like good the non-Ewok parts are.
That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
It's like it's a personal insult that they
There was
think
better stuff happening.
that they want to mess with like my real emotions and then be like, oh, just kidding, there's bears. Like,
So let me ask you this: as the Emperor is shocking Luke writhing on the floor with lightning fingers,
Lightning fingers.
did he poop his pants? Because he probably had to poop his pants. Like our big hero of
his
this
sphincter
entire
was
adventure.
so tight.
Father,
there was
help
nothing
me.
coming out of there.
I'm pretty
I
sure he
need
pooped his
toilet
pants.
paper.
These are things I did not need to
As
think
he's
about.
taking off Vader's mask for that final catharsis, and he's like seeing his real face, and like finally having this connection and finding the good in him. There was poop sloshing around in his undies,
Oh man.
right?
Thanks for taking it to the Jar Jar level with poop and fart jokes.
Misa Jar Jar Binks. Misa ruined Star Wars.
You ruined the Star Wars podcast.
Nope, didn't happen. Erased from my memory. So I always like to think of the original trilogy. Like my instructor from college, Dave Kuhn, who said there are 2.5 original Star Wars movies.
2.5 good ones.
Yeah, 2.5 good Star Wars movies. And I just like to kind of forget the Ewok part.
Well, wow. We set out to try and get something in under an hour, and wow, I think we failed. But I think we had a really great time, like talking about all of how we felt about these movies that we passionately love / are strangely frustrated with.
Right.
This as a 6-movie story, does it hold up? Is it? Can you give a single verdict
Search your feelings.
on on them as a complete package? Do you have to break them apart? Brett, do you have an impression on the total arc of the story?
I can't think of it in any other way other than a bitrilogy in which one half of it was just not worth my time. And weirdly, it's the half that was worth my time was the last half of the movie before the original trilogy and the first 2.5 movies.
So piecemeal, you can stitch together 3 good movies.
Yeah. But no, it's still the whole thing holds a special place, I think, in a lot of people's hearts. And the biggest pre-sale movie in fucking history, I think, proves that. But as a whole, I think even if you watched it in actual episodic order, I think the original trilogy really carries the rest of the stuff that was bad into a better place and like fulfills the weird plots that they started in the prequels and tried to tie stuff back in. It actually does tie in pretty well, a lot of it. Yeah. So,
Sam, what's your impression of the whole package?
I'm gonna stand by my 2.5 great Star Wars movies. Could do without the Ewoks. Kind of regretting watching the prequels, but still really love the originals.
What do you think, Ian?
They're all individual films for me. I think I can even watch Empire by itself and enjoy it based on its own merits. And if I just wanted to suggest again, everyone go watch the Phantom edit to get a new sense of what worked in that movie once they trim all the fat out.
I'm totally gonna watch it.
But I mean, they're just such cultural touchstones. It's hard to. I mean, they are culturally ubiquitous, and not just in American culture, but everywhere. There's no phenomena like that. It's very hard to sum it up in just a sentence or two. But yeah, I wonder too if there's a Return of the Jedi edit. There's got to be. I mean, if there's a Phantom edit, there's got to be a Return of the Jedi edit where the Ewoks are removed or curtailed.
Maybe.
Yeah, no C-3POs, the god of the Ewoks.
Yeah,
Oh, but that was the best part.
So for me personally, a few months ago, I was in a place where I felt like I'm burnt out on Star Wars. Settle down with the Star Wars. Why are you people so rabid about Star Wars? And I had this impression of the new movie as kind of like I could take it or leave it.
Whoa.
But I have to say, having gone through this, I've really enjoyed this experience. Going back and watching all of these movies, clearly I don't like much about Episode 1, but there's stuff to like. Mm-hmm. So this entire package, I really enjoyed it. I'm very, very excited for the new movie. I'm sure a lot of our listeners don't know about me, but I'm the guy who literally never watches trailers. And so I've been avoiding information. I'm going in very clean from a point of I just rewatched that core 6-movie story and I'm ready for more.
I
Yeah,
agree.
like Nick has literally not watched any of the new trailers. He's going to completely go into this cold.
Yeah. So Ash, your impression of the full 6-story package?
It was, like I said, I mean, it was culture shocking, such a different experience than I originally had. But at the end of the day, I have to walk away, I think, agreeing with Brett and Brett's whole position on it too. Except I don't mind the Ewoks. I was cool with that. But I was just, the experience was just so shocking to me to find that I actually did like Episode 3. Because I had not seen them since I saw them in the theater, I think. And because I walked away from them then thinking like these are a pile of steaming shit. And so it was just so shocking to me to have such a different experience. It's crazy. I can understand now why there is this younger generation of people who say that they like the prequels more than the originals. I still disagree with them, but I can understand a little bit more where they're coming from. They're wrong, but but I can understand. And that is shocking to me because I never thought that I would understand their point of view.
Bryce, what did you think?
So I'm actually going to talk for this this time. Did not like the Phantom Menace, but I will say the original, the prequels, I had only seen them in theaters when they first came out and never rewatched them. So seeing them in such close proximity this time really made me actually appreciate the second and third movie. Just not having, a year or however many years, I don't remember, to be perfectly honest. It was like 3 years? Okay. Not having this long gap in between, just going right from The Phantom Menace to Clone Wars, that juxtaposition really made me appreciate, these do get better. They, the second is much better than the first. And I think the third is much better than the second. I think they do get better. So actually I liked them better, the prequels this time around. I don't know. It gave me more context on the original 3 as well. So you had some backstory, which I really liked, which was cool. Vader's character, and like you kind of know where these characters are coming from a little bit more. So it was interesting watching it that way. It is jarring. I agree with Ash going from the newest release Star Wars to the very oldest release Star Wars. There's this huge time gap. So it's a little jarring that this is supposed to be,
I think you said it so great, just quoting you. You said you're going from the most recent made Star Wars to the first Star Wars. They're the newest and the oldest.
In a world that's supposed to be, this is supposed to be taking place in order of time, and this is, the technology somehow got worse and more dated in this time. That's weird. But, I understand it is, it's just a newer CG. It makes sense, but it was a little jarring. Yeah, it was enjoyable. Not the first one though. No, definitely can't recommend that.
Yeah.
I had one more thought. The prequels to me are them and M. Night Shyamalan movies are the two greatest cautionary tales about self-editing. when you become so popular and so significant that you fire your editors and do everything yourself, that's always what that's always what I've taken away from the prequels.
I feel like Stephen Moffat has fallen into that category as well, where he got so great and so good at storytelling that he, I guess, lost his system of checks and balances. And that totally happened to Lucas.
You guys, when you catch up with the newest season of Doctor Who, it gets much better.
Okay, I got to muscle through.
Yeah, it's much better.
Yeah, everything that George Lucas is famous for, he didn't do directly himself. I just went and looked up all the Indiana Jones movies. He didn't write any of them. Lawrence Kasdan wrote the original trilogy. So
yeah, the guy to love, or the people to love here, Lawrence Kasdan and John Williams, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. That soundtrack just made it.
Yeah, Prequel's soundtrack was fucking awesome.
Duel of the Fates is a beautiful, beautiful piece of music.
And dare I say, potentially better than the originals. Like
Maybe.
It was stunning.
It's all great.
It's stunning.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us. I hope this was enjoyable for people. I think that there's so much frenzy with Star Wars, and I know when I'm passionate and really excited about something, I just love wrapping myself in a blanket of that content. And I hope on your drive to work that our conversation, helped you hear, join in with our feelings. And I hope you yelled at us when you disagreed. And I hope I hope we connected with people on some level.
Well, and feel free to tell us how much you disagree.
Let us know on Twitter what we got wrong.
Or agree. Like, I'm really
Search your
curious.
feelings before tweeting.
Search your feeling.
No.
I'm really curious to see if anybody else had like the same experience that Bryce and I had, the like shocking culture shock.
Or any of the other, do any of you love that moment when one Ewok is down, Like, what do you connect with? What do you disagree with? We'd love to hear on Twitter.
There's a Lifetime movie in there somewhere. Ewok down.
Yeah. Not without my Ewok. The wicked W. Oryx story. So yeah, that'll do it for this special edition of Let's Rewatch. Certainly not our standard format, but we're going to get back to our normal stuff that we're releasing every 2 weeks, where of course we like to watch movies from our youth and talk about whether they hold up to a modern viewing audience. And once again, thank you, Ian, for joining us. As always, check out Ian on Passion of the Nerd on YouTube. What else, Ian? What should people look for?
My Twitter is my first name and my last name spelled backwards. So it's Ian Martin, spelled Martin backwards. I could have come up with something better than that, but that's how it goes. And
it's a rough Twitter handle.
Yeah, youtube.com/Passion of the Nerd. I'll get back on the horse sometime.
Yeah, if you love Joss Whedon as 98% of Star Wars fans do, then you're going to love some of Ian's content.
I love that precise amount, 98% precisely.
Oh,
I buy that. That's pretty accurate.
Hope you like the show because we do this all the time. It's part of the Last Stash network of content. We have a lot of different shows on YouTube. We got this thing. We're always doing more stuff. One of our other shows is Hunger Games.
Yes, which we will have a season 2 coming out, or we'll at least be filming it next year. Hopefully, stuff will be coming out next year. We will have there's some fun surprises coming in the Hunger Games horizon. That's all I'll say.
But yeah, it's you can watch Ash and Lolita cook things. There's some great video game parodies on the YouTube channel, like the Plants vs. Zombies, or my favorite one is Spider Tank.
Spider Tank is pretty great.
Yeah. And then our other show, Let's Drink, where me and Ash get drunk and have special guests. It's great.
Yeah, you can see our faces.
Yeah.
One of them is bearded.
Sometimes
I'll
I'm
let you
unhappy.
guess which one is bearded, which
It's
one
Ash.
is not.
Yeah, it's totally Ash.
Yep. Actually, if
Search
you
your
watch the
feelings, you know which
Halloween,
one.
if you watch the Halloween episode, it is me. We will actually have a brand new episode coming out this month, this December. Right now, currently, you might be listening to this in the future, but we have a new episode of Let's Drink coming out this month, probably the same week that this podcast will come out. So do check it out, and we drink some tasty holiday beers. And you can also Follow us if you want, if you're interested in more Laugh-Stash stuff besides on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter at Laugh-Stash TV, and you can follow this podcast at Let's Rewatch. And again, if you have movie suggestions, ideas, if you want to tell us how much you disagree with us, recently somebody tweeted how much they disagreed with you, Sam, on a certain topic.
Oh shit! Really?
They did.
Maybe I should
I'll have to
go
look
on
it up.
Twitter.
But it's pretty great. We've been having a lot of really good interactions lately on Twitter. I really appreciate everybody who is tweeting us and communicating. I love it when you tell us, to be perfectly honest and to part the kimono, as the phrase would be, it's me who's running the Twitter over there. So if I interact, if you get an interaction, just know it's me. I'm the one interacting. I'm trying to get these other jerks to participate on Twitter more.
I'm on Twitter.
Yeah, Brett's doing
I'm
it. He's
all over
posting
Twitter.
stuff.
I got follow me on Twitter, Bread Eagles.
Yeah.
Or Bread_Eagles. That's bread like the food and eagles like the bird, but 2 of them.
Yeah, I'm like a crotchety old lady when it comes to Twitter. I'm like, I don't understand you kids in this new
Sam
social
has like
media.
4 tweets.
One.
But we have some great people tweeting at us, like Courtney, Maisie, Elijah Thompson. I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Vern, who said that he had to sing Eye to Eye at a party last weekend. He's referring to our Goofy Movie episode with Hector Navarro that should be coming out soon. RP Gamer and What's It Podcast? I think I'm pronouncing this wrong. It's WHIST ? Podcast. But
It's clearly an acronym.
Yeah, they said this is the point that they disagreed with you, Sam, on our, we did a Mystery Men episode. And they said, I always thought the bowler's dad talking to her was her subconscious manifesting and that she controlled the ball. And I thought that was an interesting insight into it. So thank you for
that insight.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and if you liked our show, please go ahead and give us a wonderful 5-star review on iTunes. And if you didn't, search your feelings and try again.
Great. So thanks for joining us for this episode of Let's Rewatch.
Yeah, next time we'll be watching the Star Wars Christmas special.
Oh.